Melvin. Good morning. As we have done in the past with other investigations, we hope to spend a few minutes with you just sort of describing where we are in the process, what is that process, and then the steps leading into the future. In addition, we'll go over some of the kinds of things that are being looked for. There will not be any comments on findings thus far because we're right in the midst of the investigation, but we will have comments on how the process works and what goes on. On April 5th, an explosion occurred at the Upper Big Branch mine at approximately 3:02. 29 miners were killed instantly and 2 survived. Mine rescue teams attempted rescue in the days following and brought the bodies out some days later. Mine recovery teams then explored the mine over a period of some time. That recovery exploration was slow, in part because of the conditions that were found that could have presented some hazards to the individuals who were going to be part of the investigation team. The investigation began almost instantly on the surface above the mine, but did not begin underground until June the 24th. The investigation is consumed in 2 parts, or is divided into 2 parts. The first is the interviews with individuals who are witnesses who were at the mine or who have some information that the investigative team believes could be helpful in shedding light on the cause of the accident. The second part is to explore the underground part of the underground of the mine in its entirety, to look for conditions, to look for facts that may lead to the understanding of what went on in the minutes before the explosion and what went on up to the time. Governor Manchin asked me shortly after the accident occurred to conduct a special investigation. I assembled a small team of 6 individuals who those individuals have been working on the interviews and also have been a part of the underground process. Our function as an investigative team is not for regulatory purposes. It is not to look at violations, but to look at causation and to look at ways to prevent this kind of accident from occurring again, as well as to look at the agency's role, both federal and state agencies, in the period leading up to the accidents, and whether that agency role is what the agencies are mandated to do. We have participated in approximately 126 interviews as of yesterday. Those interviews will be continuing. We anticipate that there will be some quite nearly 100 more interviews that will be going on. In addition, we have been part of the investigative teams going underground. We don't have a large staff, so we have to be discreet and discriminating in what we can participate in, but we participate in those things that we think are terribly important, and they're important to the process. All of them are important, but some have more urgency to them. Underground, the teams are divided into categories. The initial team is the mapping team. That team is made up of individuals who take photos, who map, who identify parts of the mine infrastructure that are located or dislocated or located where they ought not to be, and also to look at the conditions of the mine. This mapping team then maps out for all the other teams its findings, and they're the lead team that then will identify for the second team, the evidence team, evidence that they think might be leading to understanding the accident and understanding its causes. A third team is the Flames and Forces team, and this is part of the forensic investigation. And the Flames and Forces team look at 2 things. One, they look at the result of the burn, the result of the explosion. The burn and its level of intensity, the type of burn that you see, the type of fire that you see, teaches us, it tells us what the fuel was, whether it was methane, whether it was dust, whether it was some combination of those 2, whether it was materials. And so you look at the burning of the cloth, for example, the burning of the partitions that are underground, anything that has a fire resulting in it, and that teaches you where the fire emanates from and also gives you direction. The second is the forces, and the forces adds to that direction issue. And you begin to look at where did it come from? Where was the ignition? How does the ignition work in terms of it spreads throughout the mine? Understanding that you're in a closed container. This mine is rather large. There's some 12 miles of underground workings. The forces in effect here went at the time of the explosion, we believe 2+ miles in an instant. That's a tremendous amount of energy released very quickly, and that spreads in a large area very quickly, which all of these things suggest to us that there's some, the forces at work are complicated, are severe, and are large. The miners suffered death instantaneously, it appears, from all evidence. The third team is the electrical team, and the electrical team began its job working above ground in the weeks just after the accident, and they looked at the electrical system to see whether, one, what was the impact of the explosion and on the surface, and then what was the impact of the explosion underground, and was electrical functioning part of that cause of the explosion. There's the evidence team, I think I mentioned, and that team looks for evidence of the explosion, so they try to pull some of these facts together. There are rock dust teams, and there are multiple rock dust teams. Yesterday there were 5 rock dust teams underground, and they look at the dust that was created as a result of the explosion. What happened here? What's the dust look like? And the purpose of that and the reason for that is that, again, the intensity of the fire, the intensity of the explosion, will create certain types of dust. Higher intensity will create different types of dust, of soot, in effect. And if you understand that, then you can understand what was involved as a fuel in the process. There's a photographic team, as I mentioned, and the last team is a support team that if conditions are if it's necessary to correct certain conditions after they've been mapped, after they've been looked at, those corrections would be made under the supervision of the federal and state officials. The corrections would be, for example, the railroad line underground was running through some bodies of water, creating discomfort and difficulties for the teams to get underground. Those railroad lines were raised after they had been mapped and after they had been looked at.